In 1987, a 6-year-old boy vanished during a game of hide and seek. No witnesses, no ransom, no body for over 3 decades. The house stood untouched till a young couple knocked down a wall in their basement. Behind the plaster bones, a rusted lunchbox and a roll of undeveloped film. What that film revealed would reopen a case and expose the horrifying truth buried in the walls of suburbia. This is the boy behind the wall, and the basement smelled like damp earth and forgotten years. Leah Burnett stood in the half-light, holding a chisel in one hand and a dust mask in the other. Sam was already swinging the hammer, cracking through the plaster. Their renovation dream finally underway. The first section crumbled easily. The second revealed something strange, a hollow thud. Not the solid echo of cinder block. Sam paused. Confused, he tapped again, hollow. "There's something back here." He said it took 15 minutes to pull the wall down. And when it gave way, the room fell silent. In the space between the walls sat a small skeleton curled like it had fallen asleep. Arms crossed over its chest, nearby a faded red lunchbox, its hinges rusted shut, a child's sneaker, and beside it, a roll of 35mm film sealed in a dusty plastic canister. Leah stepped back, her heart thudding against her ribs. "Sam." She whispered. The silence inside that basement suddenly felt heavy, like the house had been holding its breath for 36 years. Present-day autumn, 2023, Cherry Hill, New Jersey. The hammer struck harder than Sam meant it to. The echo bounced off the empty basement walls like a warning dust, mushroomed out from the crack in the plaster. And something behind it gave a dull, hollow thud. Lasha paused on the steps, her coffee cooling in her hand. "You hear that?" Sam said, stepping back. His shirt clung to his back, soaked from 2 hours of demo work in the humid basement air. "Yeah." Leah moved closer, setting her mug down on the utility shelf that wasn't brick. He tapped the spot again. This time it gave like drywall over empty space that wasn't supposed to be there. Not according to the 1962 floor plan they'd pulled from the county records. There's a cavity. He said, running his glove along the cracked plaster. Might be old plumbing. Access. Plumbing access doesn't hide behind sealed walls. She squinted at the uneven seams. This was patched up later. Look at the difference in the paint line. They exchanged a glance. That house had stood untouched for decades, and the seller disclosure had mentioned only light cosmetic work in the early 90s. But here, it was this crude, uneven section of wall. No more than 4 feet wide and 7 tall, just enough to conceal something. Sam raised the hammer again. 2 more hits, and the wall began to splinter. Leah turned her head and coughed as a cloud of white dust exploded from the crack. Something tumbled out with it, clattering across the concrete floor, a strip of yellowed wood, then another sound, softer, sicker, a dry, papery snap. Sam bent down, brushing aside plaster chunks, and then he froze. Leah said quietly, "Don't come any closer." "What is it?" she asked, already stepping forward. "I mean it." But it was too late. She saw it inside the cavity. Between studs and crumbling insulation was a skeleton. Child-sized, curled into itself. The bones were collapsed inward, ribs like dry leaves. Skull tilted to the side, as if resting beside it was a lunchbox, red metal cartoon. Characters barely visible through the grime. The handle was twisted, rusted at the ends. A faded sneaker sat nearby, tiny, frayed at the laces. Leah couldn't move. Sam stood there, his hammer limp in one hand, his breath caught in his throat. Neither spoke for a long time. Then Leah reached out and pointed with trembling fingers to a small clear canister lodged behind the bones. A roll of undeveloped film. "Oh my God," she whispered. And they called the police. And when the sirens came loud and sudden wailing down their quiet street, Leah stood on the curb, her arms folded against the October wind, watching their house disappear behind yellow tape. Neighbors peeked from porches. Children were called indoors, and the Burnetts answered questions, gave statements, handed over the film and the remains and the shoe. And then they sat on the tailgate of an ambulance and waited for someone to tell them what the hell had just happened in their own home. The forensics techs took their time. They always did in these situations, not just because of evidence, because of history. The bones were old. Everyone could see that. But bones didn't bury themselves behind drywall. And the way the child was found, folded inward arms, across the chest, as if he'd simply given up, made every officer on scene a little quieter than usual. Lieutenant Dawson finally approached you. "Tu said you bought the house in June?" he asked. Sam nodded. "Yeah, original owner sold it through her grandson. She passed last year. We just moved in this summer. Did the seller disclose anything strange?" Leia blinked. Like what? Like past incidents, previous repairs, water damage, Mulavian rodent infestations. Anything that might have involved opening the walls. No, she said. "We got the original permits. There was nothing about this. Nothing about any sealed structure that was just wall until today." Dawson jotted a note on his pad and then paused. "Do you have any children?" Leia shook her head. "Number just us." The lieutenant exhaled. He glanced back at the open basement window where the cold air carried up the faint smell of dust and something older. The remains were being carefully lifted, now wrapped in plastic and placed inside a soft evidence bag. "Any idea who used to live here?" he asked. Sam answered just what the real estate file said. Last owner was Evelyn Hull, lived here since the 80s. "No one between her and us?" Dawson's head lifted. "Did you say Hull?" "Yeah." Why? The detective's eyes narrowed. Was her grandson's name? "Ben Leia." And Sam exchanged a look, I think. "So Ben Hull, he handled the paperwork, came up from Baltimore for the closing." Dawson stared at the house, then slowly closed his notebook. In 1987. He said almost to himself, "A boy named Jeremy Hall went missing on this street, 6 years old. Last seen playing hide-and-seek with other kids in this neighborhood. He lived in that house." He looked back at the couple, and his voice dropped. They never found him. Summer 1987. Cherry Hill, New Jersey. The cicadas screamed in the trees. Jeremy Holt crouched low behind the neighbor's trash cans, trying not to giggle. His small hands gripped the warm concrete knees tucked under him. The smell of grass clippings and motor oil sharp in his nose. Sweat ran down his neck, tickling the space between his shoulder blades. It was almost 5 p. The sun was still high, casting long shadows across the street. A sprinkler hissed somewhere nearby. Someone grilled hot dogs. The air shimmered with heat, static and innocence. He could hear the other kids counting from the front yard. 17, 18, 19, 20. "Ready or not, here I come." That was Trevor's voice, older, loud. Jeremy didn't like him much. He always cheated, always pee. The game was supposed to be simple, hide and seek, one hider, one seeker. But by then, it had become a group thing, neighborhood kids filtering in as the long summer day wore on. Jeremy's brother Ben had said it was okay. As long as they stayed on their side of the street, Jeremy pressed tighter against the garbage bin, hoping the stink would keep Trevor away. He didn't care if it was gross. He wanted to win. He wanted to make Ben proud. Ben was 13, old enough to watch him, while Mom worked the afternoon shift at the diner, old enough to boss him around. But Jeremy didn't mind. Ben let him tag along more than the other older kids their dad had been, gone nearly a year. By then, Jeremy didn't miss him much. He remembered the shouting, the way things always smelled like whiskey and ash when Dad was home. But since he'd left, things were quieter, just him, Ben, and Mom, and the house on Colonial Court. Jeremy liked their house. The basement had a rec room with old board games. His room had blue wallpaper with stars. And in the corner of the yard was a crooked tree with a birdhouse shaped like a lighthouse. He'd built it with Ben last spring, hammering nails with both hands, while their mom watched from the porch, and the front yard was mostly dirt now, thanks to Trevor and his stupid bike. But Jeremy had his own little world behind the hedges. That's where he'd hidden his treasures: a toy sheriff badge, a shark tooth from Wildwood, a marble with a swirl of blue that looked like the ocean. He thought about the marble now, trying to distract himself from the heat. He shifted position slightly, And that's when he heard footsteps close. Jeremy held his breath, but the footsteps didn't sound like Trevor's too slow, heavy Jeremy, a voice whispered. He blinked. Jeremy, come on. The voice coaxed, new game, better one. It wasn't Trevor. It wasn't any of the kids. Jeremy peeked around the trash can. A teenager stood on the edge of the yard. Not someone from the neighborhood. He wore a gray t-shirt and old sneakers. One lace untied, his hair was dark, sullied down like he'd just gotten out of the shower. Jeremy tilted his head. Do I know you? The teen smiled. Ben said, I could show you something in the basement, a secret. Jeremy hesitated. Ben never let people into the basement, not without Mom home. Still, he stood up slowly. The game was over. Trevor would find someone else. And secrets were cool, okay? Jeremy said. The teen held out his hand. Jeremy didn't take it, but he followed, crossing back into his own yard, past the broken hose reel in the flower pot. With dead marigolds, the side door to the house was cracked open. The teen stepped inside. Jeremy hesitated one more time. Glancing back toward the street, the other kids were gone. Trevor was chasing someone across the lawns, laughing. Then Jeremy slipped through the door. It closed behind him with a soft click. Ben realized something was wrong around 6:30. He'd gotten distracted playing Nintendo with Trevor in his room, trying to finally beat Metroid. It wasn't until the sky started turning orange outside the window that he realized Jeremy hadn't come back. He asked the other kids. No one had seen him since the game they searched for 20 minutes before Ben ran inside, heart racing, calling Jeremy's name. He checked the basement. Empty. He checked the backyard. Empty. He even checked behind the trash cans. Still nothing when their mom pulled into the driveway at 7:15, tired, apron still on. Ben was already crying. Jeremy's gone. He said, I don't know where he went. October 2023, Camden County, New Jersey. The TV was muted. But the image lingered. An aerial shot from a news helicopter hovered over a small brick house on Colonial Court. Yellow tape crisscrossed the front yard. Police vehicles flanked the curb, and the chyron at the bottom read, Human remains found in basement wall, possible link to 1987 cold case. Harold Wexler sat in his recliner, a mug of lukewarm tea on the table beside him, his reading glasses still in his lap, and the volume wasn't necessary. He didn't need to hear the anchor stumble through the details. He already knew the name they hadn't mentioned yet. Jeremy Holt Wexler hadn't heard that name aloud in years. Not since he retired in 2008, but the memory surfaced now. Vivid and sharp, the blistering July heat and the flyers posted on every telephone pole. The desperate mother clutching a school photo of her son and the scent of damp carpet in the basement. When they searched it twice, he leaned forward, staring at the screen. That was the house. No question, same faded shutters, same sloped driveway. But now the crawl space had given up its secret. He didn't know what made his stomach twist more. The discovery, or the fact that it took 36 years to find. Back then, the call came in just after 8:00 p.m. A 6-year-old boy missing Jeremy's mother had called in from the payphone at the corner gas station after Ben flagged her down mid-shift. She ran home frantic still. In her stained uniform, said her youngest son never wandered far, especially not after dark, said he hated the dark, said he knew better. Wexler remembered arriving on scene, the front yard scattered with children and concerned neighbors, the Holt boy's brother pacing barefoot on the porch, crying and trying not to. The mother, Danielle Hole, pale with rage and panic, her voice cracking as she told them over and over. He wouldn't just leave. Someone took him. Someone took my boy. They canvassed the block, talked to every neighbor, put out an APB within the hour. By midnight, volunteers were combing the nearby woods. But there were no tire tracks, no signs of forced entry, no ransom call, no screams heard, no witnesses, just a child who disappeared. The backyard shed was empty, the attic untouched, the basement clean, too clean. And yet there had been a smell down there, faint even then. Wexler had noted it, recorded it, but the air quality report had come back negative for rot or mold. He'd made a mental note to return to dig deeper, but the captain had shut the case down, after 3 weeks, told them it was likely a runaway at 6 years old. They'd called it an open investigation. But by the fall of 1987, Jeremy Holt had become a name on a dusty file. The city had other problems. Wexler never let it go. Couldn't something about the way that house felt stayed with him? That low ceiling in the basement, the chipped paint, the too perfect carpet near the utility sink, now staring at the muted news footage. It all came rushing back. He picked up the landline. Dialed slowly. The number hadn't changed since he'd last called 5 years ago. Cherry Hill PD said, "The woman on the line. This is Harold Wexler, badge number 1237. Retired, I need to speak with whoever's running the Colonial Court investigation." Pause, Colonial Court, she repeated suddenly. "Alert, you mean the human remains case?" "Yes," he said. "Tell them to check the original case file." The boy's name was Jeremy Hole. I was the lead on it. He paused and tell them to look for my note about the basement. I don't care how long it's been. It was never just a missing kid. I knew it then. By the time he hung up, the news had moved on. Another story, another headline, but Wexler didn't move. He sat in silence as the tea went cold. The house creaked around him. His knee throbbed where it always did. When the weather changed, he stared at the blank screen, whispered almost to himself. I told them to open that wall. Cherry Hill Police Department, 1014A. October 16th, 2023. Detective Riley Mercer leaned over the open case file, eyes scanning decades-old notes with disbelief and frustration. The manila folder had yellowed along the edges, and the typewritten reports faded, and brittle paper clips rusted. Half the photos had curled from moisture. And in the middle of it, all penned in neat cursive with black ink, was a name that stopped her cold. Jeremy Hole, age. See missing, July 18th, 1987. A tabbed sticky note stuck to one of the pages read in faded red ink. No signs of forced entry. Baseline search. Completed. Case remains open. No signs of forced entry, but the kid's bones were inside the house behind a goddamn wall. She looked up, heart drumming in her chest. "Get me anything we have on the original detective." She called out to the intern outside her office. "Wexler, Harold, retired, badge 1237. He just called this morning, said we'd find a note about the basement." 10 minutes later, she was holding it, a single line, in a supplemental report dated August 5th, 1987, 3 weeks. After the disappearance, unusual odor near southeast basement wall. Recommend further structural inspection. No follow-up authorized at this time. Signed, Detective H. Wexler. No follow-up, no inspection, nothing. Riley swore under her breath and snapped the folder shut. Across town, a forensic pathologist lifted the cracked femur of a child no older than 7. From a sterile metal tray, the remains had been carefully cleaned, cataloged, and placed in the autopsy suite. The bones were brittle from time, but not destroyed. Not buried in soil, just sealed inside that cavity, airless and silent for 36 years. Dr. Julianne Rowe made the note quietly. Into her recorder, estimated age of remains 6 to 7 years. Initial visual confirms. Long-term indoor confinement, protected from elemental decay. Several stress fractures on ribs, possible pre-mortem trauma. No obvious bullet wounds, skull intact. Cause of death, undetermined. Film canister and metal lunchbox submitted to evidence texts for latent analysis. She paused, glancing at the small rusted sneaker lying beside the tray. A child's name was written on the sole in faint, permanent marker. Jeremy H., back at the station. Detective Mercer paced. "So what's our timeline?" She asked the assembled team. "Forensic says the bones match the age range." Answered Officer Chen. "Dental records are being pulled from state archives. The family's moved around. But we tracked down the older brother. Ben Holt lives in Baltimore, works in logistics. He's on his way here." "And the mother?" Riley asked. "Passed in 2011. Stroke. Chen replied, "No current address for the father. He left the family in 86, never resurfaced. Last known residence was in Trenton, but nothing recent." Riley's jaw tightened. "So that leaves the brother. Let's see what he remembers. And the interview room was quiet. Except for the hum of fluorescent lights, Ben Holt sat at the small table, fingers laced tightly, mid-40s, graying at the temple shoulders, slumped like someone who'd been carrying too much weight for too long. His eyes were bloodshot. His voice, when he spoke, barely made it across the table. "Are you sure it's him?" he asked. Riley sat across from him, hands folded. "We won't know for certain until dental confirmation." "But the lunchbox, the film, the size, the wall. It's him, Mr. Hull." Ben exhaled slowly. His hands trembled. "I was 13. I was supposed to be watching him. He said we were playing hide and seek. I thought he went off with the other kids. I didn't even realize he was gone until it was too late." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "We searched everywhere. Backyard, attic, even the stupid crawl space in the garage, but not the wall. Never thought to check inside the wall." Riley's voice was gentle but firm. "Do you remember anything unusual? Anyone around the house that day? Strange behavior, workers, friends of the family?" Ben's jaw worked. He shook his head. "I've gone over it in my mind for years, 1,000 times. There was no one, just me, Jeremy, the neighbor's kids." He hesitated. Although there was this one guy, he added, eyes narrowing. Riley perked up. "Go on." "He was older, not one of our friends, maybe 17, 18, showed up for a few weeks that summer, said he was related to someone down the block. I think he was staying with the Donnies, or maybe the Sullivans. I don't know, do you remember?" His name, Ben, closed his eyes number, but he gave me a weird feeling. I remember that later that night, Riley sat alone in the evidence lab with the film canister. They hadn't developed it, yet too fragile. But she'd requested digital imaging when the lab techs uploaded the scan negatives onto the department server. She pulled them up on her screen. Well, there were only 4 images, grainy, blurred by time and dust. The first, a child, in a blue t-shirt sitting cross-legged in what appeared to be a basement corner. Smiling. The second, the same boy, same spot. But this time, someone else was in frame, a shadow, a partial face out of focus. The third, just the child. No smile, looking off to the side. And the fourth, Riley's stomach flipped, and the fourth image was a wall, half-sealed plaster bucket in the foreground, a hand holding a tell, sealing it shut. It's on October 18th, 2023. Cherry Hill Police Department Evidence Imaging Division. Leah Burnett sat alone in the sterile viewing room, her hands curled tightly around a styrofoam cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. She hadn't touched it. Her gaze remained fixed on the computer monitor across from her, the one that held 4 images. "No mother should ever have to see. Take your time," said the tech beside her gently. "You don't have to look if it's too much." But Leah nodded. "I want to see everything." It had taken 2 full days for the forensic lab to develop the film properly. If the roll was degraded, the emulsion eaten in places by time and air. But the university film archivist they'd brought in from Rutgers had worked with images like these before the film had been Jeremy's. That much was clear. Probably shot on a disposable camera, the kind you bought at the grocery store counter for $6 in the 80s. Maybe his parents had given it to him as a summer treat. Maybe it was already loaded in the camera when he found it. Whatever the case, those 4 photos were. Under the last known pieces of his story captured from behind that wall, sealed away in darkness. Leah stared now as they flicked across the screen, one by one. The first, Jeremy, smiling, legs crossed, holding a juice box in one hand, a crayon in the other, behind him, unfinished drywall, and pink insulation. And the look on his face was innocent, trusting. She covered her mouth with one hand. He didn't know, she whispered. He didn't know he wasn't going to. "Come out." The second photo appeared, Jeremy again this time. Another person stood nearby, barely in frame. A blurry male figure, adolescent, in a gray t-shirt. You couldn't see the face, just part of the torso and a bent knee. The boy was standing. Jeremy was sitting. "Can you enhance this?" she asked. "We're trying." The technician said, "We've run it through a few filters. Facial recognition software struggling. The resolution is just too degraded." But he tapped a key. On the side of the teenager's shirt, faint but visible, were 3 blocky white letters. Stay could be part of a name. The tech offered, or a local school, a team jersey. Anything. Leia leaned closer. I've seen that before. She said that shirt, that font. She didn't say it aloud. But she'd seen it in her dreams. Third image flicked on Jeremy again this time. Not smiling, his hands were on his lap. His face pale, he was looking slightly off camera towards something or someone outside the frame. There was fear in his expression, or maybe confusion. Leia's heart thudded. What was he seeing? She whispered. The fourth and final image loaded. Not Jeremy, not even a person at first glance, just a wall. Partially sealed, a bucket of plaster in the foreground, a hand, an older hand, not a child's, spreading the material in a slow, deliberate arc. They covered him up, she said hollowly. They made him sit there while they sealed it. Looks like someone else took that photo. The text said he couldn't have taken it himself. The angle's wrong. It was someone else documenting it. Maybe as a sick joke, maybe for proof. Leia stood abruptly. I want to speak to the detective, she said. Now Detective Mercer arrived within 5 minutes. Her coat still damp from the drizzle outside. They showed you the photos, she asked gently. Yes, Leia replied. And I remember that shirt from where Leia sat again. She looked tired, drawn, but focused. My cousin used to live 3 blocks from here on Ellington Avenue in 1987. Her son had a friend, always wore a gray team shirt. I think it said Stafford Tigers or something like that. A summer sports league out of Camden. The kid was older, weird, kind of quiet, always watching. Do you remember a name? Leia nodded slowly. Corey Treadwell. He was 17 or 18. He used to hang around when we were babysitting at my cousin's place. And he was at that house, this house, one summer when my husband and I came by to help move furniture. I didn't think anything of it then, just a neighborhood kid. But now she swallowed hard. I think that was him in the picture. I think he was the one in the basement with Jeremy. Detective Mercer excused herself and returned to her office, the name already ringing in her head. She pulled up the old neighborhood roster there. It was Corey Allen Treadwell, age 17 in 1987. Lived with his uncle 2 streets down, no arrest record, moved to Pennsylvania. In 1989, no forwarding address. Riley picked up the phone and dialed missing persons at state records. I need everything you've got on a Corey Treadwell cross-reference, Cherry Hill, 1987. And any registered addresses in the Camden County area, then check for employment records. Recent DMV hits, property leases, anything. She leaned back in her chair. Adrenaline thrumming through her fingertips. We just found our person of interest, she said aloud. And she was right, because 1 hour later the database returned. A hit. Corey Treadwell, age 53, lives alone, owns a property in rural Bucks County, Pennsylvania, less than 90 miles from where Jeremy Hall had died. October 19th, 2023, Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Ben Hall stood on the curb outside the police station, his hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets, the wind pushing hard through the rust-cold leaves. Across the street, the same elementary school he and Jeremy had once attended loomed quiet, its windows reflecting the overcast sky. He hadn't been back to Cherry Hill in almost 20 years. The town looked smaller now. Or maybe it was just that he had gotten older, worn down. His memories of that summer had been boxed up long ago, pushed to the back of his mind like dusty VHS tapes. No one dared rewind. But after yesterday's interview, those memories were crawling back, sharp, disjointed, and loud, especially the voice. Ben. I'll show him something cool. Just 5 minutes. That was Corey Treadwell. He remembered it now, the way he loitered around the block that summer, too old to be hanging out with kids, always pretending to be helpful, always watching. And he remembered that specific day, too. July 18th, 1987. Corey had shown up at the house early, said he was helping the Donnies move an old TV and needed a hand. Ben said no. He was watching Jeremy. His mom had made it clear. No visitors, no going anywhere, no exceptions. Corey had smiled. Friendly, calm. 5 minutes, he'd said, I'll even bring him right back. Ben had hesitated just for a moment, and that hesitation cost everything back inside. Detective Mercer reviewed the latest reports with him in her office. The images, the address, the hit on Corey Treadwell he's living in. Bucks County, she told Ben. No criminal record, no spouse, no kids, owns a cabin off a state road near Milford. Ben stared at the floor. He said he'd bring him right back. Mercer softened her tone. You were 13. You trusted someone who didn't deserve it. This isn't your fault. Ben laughed bitterly. You tell that to my mother. She spent the rest of her life thinking Jeremy ran away because I wasn't paying attention. I let her think that, because you believed it too. Mercer said, but Jeremy didn't run. Ben looked up number. He followed someone he thought was a friend. There was silence. Then he asked, what happens now? We have a warrant in process. Mercer replied, we're going to his property. If he's there, we'll bring him in. She paused and then added, and if he's not, we'll find him this time. We're not going to let it get buried. That afternoon, Ben drove past his childhood home. The yellow tape was still strung across the porch rail. 2 cruisers parked outside a forensics van, idled by the curb. Sam and Laya Burnett weren't home. At least, not visibly. But the house looked different now. Not just because of the investigation. It looked smaller, tighter, like a body curled in on itself. He didn't stop instead. He turned the corner and parked across from the old park, the one where he and Jeremy used to race bikes and throw baseballs in the gravel field, and the swings were gone now, replaced by bright new plastic structures and padded flooring. But the trees were the same. Still gnarled and bent still whispering. When the wind blew just right, he got out of the car and stood there staring across the empty field. And for the first time in over 3 decades, he let himself say it out loud. I'm sorry, Jeremy, he said it once. Then again, until the wind swallowed his voice, and there was nothing left to say. October 20th, 2023. Ocala. Assisted living, Trenton, New Jersey. The hallway smelled of bleach and wilted flowers. Detective Riley Mercer walked past open doorways, where soft televisions murmured and wheelchairs rested like sleeping dogs. This was the place the case file had pointed her to. Thomas Holt, the father, absent since 1986, on record as having walked out on his family. No contact in decades, until now a recent Medicare update had flagged his residency at Oak Hollow. He'd been checked in under state guardianship after suffering a minor stroke and early-onset dementia. No listed family, no visitors. Mercer glanced down at her notepad, room 214B. She knocked softly. A nurse poked her head out of the adjoining room. Detective Mercer. That's me. He's awake quiet today, doesn't talk much unless something sparks him. But you're welcome to try. Mercer nodded and stepped in. And the man in the bed was barely more than bone. Under skin, wisps of gray hair framed a face deeply lined, the hollows beneath his eyes, etched with a wear of time and consequence. He didn't turn when she entered. Mr. Holt, she said gently. No response. She took the chair beside his bed and sat quiet present, and then she set a single photo on the table beside him. Jeremy, from the first frame of the recovered film. Smiling, juice box in hand, blue t-shirt, cross-legged in a dusty basement corner. The old man's eyes flicked toward it and stayed. Mercer watched him carefully. You know this boy? She asked. A faint tremble passed through his fingers. My name is Detective Mercer. I'm investigating the disappearance of your son, Jeremy Hole. You were listed as his father. He blinked slowly. His lips moved, but no sound came. Mercer leaned closer. Do you remember anything from that summer? From July 1987. The old man whispered something barely audible. She leaned closer. Still, he said it again. He said he'd be quiet forever. Mercer's spine stiffened. Who said that? Thomas Holt closed his eyes. His breathing grew uneven. Mercer placed her hand gently on the edge of the bed. And Mr. Holt, please, you may be the only one who can tell us what really happened. His voice was horror-tattered. He said, just a game. He murmured, told me he'd make it look like the boy ran off. Said he'd teach him a lesson for being a little brat. Mercer's pulse quickened. Who told you that? The old man's eyes opened for a moment. Clarity burned through the fog of dementia. The neighbor boy. The one who always watched, the one with the dead eyes. Mercer swallowed. Corey Treadwell. Thomas Holt nodded, and then with a final wheeze of breath, he said the words Mercer would never forget. He asked for the keys to the basement, said he needed the quiet for his plan. Outside, the nurse waited with a clipboard. "How'd he do?" she asked as Mercer emerged. "Enough." Mercer said he gave us enough. She walked down the hallway, heart thudding harder with each step, because if Treadwell had access to the house before Jeremy vanished, if he had keys trust time, then this wasn't just opportunistic, it was planned. And Jeremy hadn't been his first visit, or Mercer feared his last. October 21st, 2023, Colonial Court Residence, Cherry Hill, New Jersey. The crawl space had been sealed with 2 layers of plywood, a rusted lock, and what looked like 30 years of forgotten air. The house was quiet now. Sam and Leah Burnett were staying at a hotel. Forensics had full access. Detective Mercer knelt just inside the threshold, her flashlight slicing through cobwebs and decades of dust. Officer Chen stood beside her, flipping through old house schematics. No record of this room. He muttered, "According to permits, this crawl space shouldn't even exist yet. Here it is." Mercer said it was a tight space, maybe 4 feet high. The insulation had degraded to paper rodent droppings, dusted the far corners, and in the center of it all, laid out like an altar, was a child's blanket, faded yellow, patterned with dinosaurs. She recognized it immediately. It had been in one of the photos. Mercer crawled forward, ignoring the sting of insulation fibers against her skin. There were more objects now. A toy sheriff badge dulled by age, a cracked marble, a cheap plastic harmonica. One by one she examined them. These weren't just keepsakes. They were offerings, Jeremy's things, each piece placed with strange care, as if someone had laid them down in ritual. As if someone had been coming back. A faint shimmer caught her eye. Scratches along the plywood near the far wall. She crawled toward it, heart thutooing in her chest, and the scratches weren't random. They were deliberate, etched deep. She raised her flashlight and read the words aloud. "Let me out." Below it, carved with something jagged, he said he'd come back. "I was good. I stayed quiet." Mercer exhaled slowly. Chen crouched beside her. "My God, I think he was alive when they sealed it," she whispered, "at least for a while." A pause. Then Chen said, "You need to see this." He handed her a small object, a tiny cassette recorder, the kind popular in the 80s for dictation. It was caked in grime, but still intact. A cassette inside was labeled in smudged handwriting. J.H. promised they would have to send it to audio forensics, but Mercer already felt it deep in her gut, and this wasn't just a murder. It was confinement, manipulation, possibly torture, and that word, promise, it meant something. 2 hours later, a forensics team located a second crawl space panel behind the HVC duct inside it. They found 2 more cassette tapes, a series of crude sketches. One drawing showed a tall figure with no face, holding something that looked like a leash. Another showed the basement wall from the inside. The child's eye view below the drawings, a final note was scrolled in pencil. He said, "I was the project that night." Mercer sat in her car outside the Cherry Hill station, playing the digital copy of the first cassette over the department laptop. The sound was warped, distorted by age, but one thing was clear, a child's voice. Jeremy's quiet, composed. "My name is Jeremy Hole. I'm 6. If you find this, I was here. I waited. I didn't scream. Like he said, I stayed still. I stayed. Good silence." Then he said if I did everything right, I'd get to leave. He called it the promise. Said I'd graduate, be part of his collection. The last word made Mercer flinch. Collection. She stared at the screen, sick dread creeping up her spine. What if Jeremy wasn't the first? What if he wasn't the only one? October 22nd, 2003. Wexler's home, Edgewater, New Jersey. The old detective sat hunched at his kitchen table, surrounded by a sea of paper case files. Xeroxes, newspaper clippings, all yellowed with age and marked by the steady hand of a man who refused to forget. A cup of untouched coffee steamed beside him. On the center of the table sat a photo of Jeremy Hall, and beside it, a single black and white print from 1985. Another missing child, this one barely remembered, a girl from Asbury Park, age 7, disappeared during a garage sale. Never found Harold Wexler had been a younger man, then lean fierce. He'd still believed in justice in the system, in things making sense. Now he believed in rot, in what furs. When people look away too long, the file in front of him wasn't Jeremy's. It was one the department had buried in a separate drawer, one that had no reason to be connected until now. Where the girl's name was Samantha Leary disappeared, summer of '85. No forced entry, no witnesses. A neighbor claimed she'd last seen the girl playing outside with an older teenage boy with dark hair, the same vague description, different town. No charges were filed. Wexler had written a summary back then. He'd noted something that haunted him. Now child may have been lured into an unfinished basement of neighboring property under false pretense, no signs of struggle sent. Dogs lost the trail inside a crawl space behind wallboard, that house torn down. In 1994, the boy never identified. Until now. Wexler picked up his phone and dialed Mercer's number directly. She answered after the second ring. "I've been expecting your call," she said. "You were right about Treadwell." Wexler rasped. "I think I was wrong about a lot of other things." "How many others?" he sighed. "That's what I'm trying to figure out. I found something." Mercer said Jeremy recorded a tape. He talked about being part of a collection, something called Project Promise. Wexler's breath caught. He hadn't heard that phrase in years, but it triggered something, a sick little echo in the pit of his gut. 1985. He said slowly. "Samantha Leary case, the file I pulled just now." She used that phrase too. She wrote it on the back of her math homework 2 days before she vanished. There was a pause on the other end. She was part of it. Mercer said, just like Jeremy later that evening. Mercer and Chen stood in the evidence archive beneath Cherry Hill PD headquarters, poring over dozens of cold case files Wexler had flagged over the years. It was overwhelming, disorganized, intentionally neglected here, Yin said, pulling one folder from the third cabinet. Kevin Maddox, age 5, disappeared. 1983. Last seen in the basement of his grandmother's house in Edison. Another child, another wall. Mercer shook her head slowly. "This isn't a case anymore," she whispered. "It's a pattern." She looked down at the cover of Jeremy's file. Whole. Jeremy Thomas, age 6, missing July 1987, confirmed deceased October 2023. And then she said it aloud. For the first time, this was a program across the state. Corey Treadwell sat alone in his cabin. He hadn't seen the news. He didn't have internet, but he knew he'd seen the unmarked car in town yesterday. The way the waitress at the diner avoided his eyes, and the extra patrol that looped the woods after dark, and they were coming still. He wasn't afraid. Not really, because they wouldn't find the others. Not unless they knew the coordinates, not unless they knew the rules. October 23rd, 2023, Cherry Hill, New Jersey. The door opened on the third knock. Marjorie Donnelly stood in the doorway, thinner than Riley Mercer remembered her once, steely hair now white. Her back bowed slightly. By times she looked like any grandmother in the suburbs. But Mercer had long since stopped trusting appearances. "I knew you'd come." Marjorie said softly, voice like rustling paper. "Come in." They sat at the kitchen table, the same one from the old neighborhood block parties, the PTA meetings, the summer lemonade sales. It was all still there. The linoleum tile, the dusty radio, the smell of old sugar and mothballs. But the house felt colder now. Heavier. You knew about Corey. Mercer said not a question. Marjorie looked down at her teacup. We all did. Mercer's jaw tensed. Who's we? A long pause. Marjorie's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her cup on its saucer. The Donnies, the Sullivans, the Bergs, that whole side of the block. We all knew something was wrong that summer. Why didn't anyone report it? We did. Some of us tried, she said. But his uncle worked for the Township Parks Department, had friends in the mayor's office. They made it go away. Marjorie's eyes finally met Mercer's. And none of us wanted to admit the truth that a boy we saw every day could do something like that we'd invited it into our lives back in 1987. Corey Treadwell had floated between homes. His mother was institutionalized, his father gone. His uncle took him in for the summer, no legal guardianship, no social oversight. He worked long hours, left Corey unsupervised. Corey was always in someone's yard, fixing fences, walking dogs, offering to babysit. It had seemed harmless, polite. But one afternoon, Marjorie said her youngest daughter came inside, crying. Said Corey had tried to show her a secret game in the basement. Said he told her about a club, a special place for kids who listened. Marjorie had pulled her daughter inside, locked the doors, and told the neighbors. And that's where the pact was made. They agreed to keep their kids indoors, to never let them be alone with Corey again, to watch to wait. But no one ever warned the Holes, not until Jeremy disappeared. I told Danielle the day after it happened, Marjorie whispered. Now told her we suspected something, told her I was sorry. What did she say? She slapped me? Mercer looked away. I didn't blame her, Marjorie added. She buried her son, even if she didn't have a body. She buried herself too, moved away. 3 years later, never spoke to any of us again. Mercer set a photo on the table. Jeremy, the crawl space, the cassette tapes. Did you ever hear him talk about this? She pointed to the words, Project Promise. Marjorie paused. Yes, she whispered. That's what he called it. Did anyone ask what it meant? We thought it was something he made up, a name for his fantasy world, a game. Mercer shook her head. It wasn't a game. It was a pattern, a ritual, maybe even a belief system, and he's still using it. That night, Detective Mercer sat in her car and made a call to Wexler. He picked that phrase deliberately. She said Project Promise. It wasn't just a name. It was a structure, a method. Wexler was quiet for a moment, then he didn't act alone. He said no. Mercer agreed, and if there's a structure, there's a system. She opened her laptop, pulled up the map. 6 missing children, over 7 years, all within 80 meters, a straight line with Cherry Hill at its center. She traced it with her finger heart, pounding. What kind of system buries children behind walls? She asked aloud. And the screen, cold and bright, had no answer. October 24th, 2023, Evidence Lab, Cherry Hill Police Department, and the first tape was distorted, static, choked, warped by time. But the voice was unmistakable. Jeremy, day 4. I think he brought me soup today. It was cold, but I ate it. He said I'd done a good job not talking when the other people came by upstairs. Detective Riley Mercer sat rigid in the dim audio analysis room beside her. The technician adjusted dials, trying to clean the sound. He said, I'm part of a graduation group that, after I finish the promise, I'll get to live in a better place somewhere, and no one can hurt me. Riley's throat tightened. She motioned for the tech to pause. Is that the second tape or still the first? She asked. First, he said. The second gets worse. The second cassette had a sharper hiss, like someone had recorded over parts of it. There were gaps, long ones, but when the audio returned, the tone had changed. He brought someone else. Today said her name was Sam. She's younger than me. I think she's scared. A pause. A low sound, a sob. He said, we'd take turns with the flashlight, that we had to earn it. Still be quiet. That's how the rules work. Another pause. I heard him fixing the wall again. Hammer sounds. He's making it thicker. Mercer closed her eyes. Another child, Sam, Samantha Leary, disappeared in 1985. Somehow Jeremy had been there with her, or at least heard of her. Had they been confined together, one after the other? What did graduation mean? Tape 3 was shorter, only 22 seconds, a different voice entirely. Male, older, calm. This concludes Phase 2 subject. Holt remains compliant, minor emotional instability. Following cohabitation with subject SL, now removed from the program. Subject shows strong response to reward-based stimuli, structural integrity. Of enclosure remains sound, the voice. Paused, recommend. Continuation, estimated window for transition, 4 to 6 weeks, awaiting external directive. Riley froze, external directive. She repeated aloud. The technician looked up. You think this was organized? She rewound and replayed the clip this time, letting it roll into the faint hum at the end transition, awaiting external directive. Mercer stood and walked straight to the digital forensics team. "Pull everything from that voice," she said. "Run it through the federal database, any recorded psychiatric sessions, court transcripts, police interviews, anything." The analyst nodded. "We're on it." She didn't wait. She walked back to her office and called Wexler. "You were right," she said, voice tight. "There was a system." Jeremy wasn't just a victim. He was a subject, a test case, like they were running a bad experiment. Wexler was quiet on the other end. Then how many tapes? 3 confirmed, 1 missing tape. 4, we found the case for it. But the cassette's gone. Wexler exhaled slowly. Someone took it or never left it behind in the first place. Meanwhile, in a cabin 80 miles away, Corey Treadwell sat in the dark, the only light coming from an old slide projector he clicked to the next frame. Children, 8 of them, some smiling, some terrified, all catalogued in grainy, chilling black and white on the wall beside him. Under dim lamplight hung a hand-drawn grid project. Promised graduation timeline. 5 names were crossed out, 3 remained below them in red marker. Was one last word retrieve, October 25th, 2023. Bucks, County, Pennsylvania. The cabin sat at the end of a gravel path, half swallowed by pines, its windows dark, its porch sagging like a mouth drained of breath. Detective Riley Mercer stood behind a parked cruiser, Kevlar vest tight against her chest, her breath visible in the morning chill behind her. A tactical unit moved in silence. They had the warrant. They had the voice match. The Department of Justice had confirmed that Corey Treadwell's voice from the tapes matched a psychiatric evaluation from 1992. Long buried in state archives, he had once been flagged as intellectually disorganized but non-violent during a brief stay in juvenile detention. No one followed up now. And they were here. The team moved fast. Front door, breached entry cleared, but the cabin was empty. No sign of Corey, no sign of anyone. Until they reached the basement. It wasn't a basement so much as a pit. Dug by hand, reinforced with bricks and plywood, a hatch beneath the rug, a chain latch inside. The air was thick with mildew and rust. Then came the silence, that sick wrong. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. Mercer stepped in. Shined her flashlight. Photographs lined the wall, taped in neat rows, labeled in black handwriting. Samantha Leary, subject, Kevin Maddox, subject B. Jeremy Holt, subject C. Celia Huang, subject D. Missing 1989. Never linked. Milo Davis, subject E, presumed runaway. 1990, Amara Collins. Subject F reported, drowned, unreovered. 6 names. All real, all vanished within a 50 Mercer radius, over a 10-year period. Beneath the photos, a locked cabinet, inside vials, torn bits of clothing, childlike drawings, dozens of cassette tapes, and a folder marked Transition Protocols at the center of the room. On a crude desk lay 1 more cassette tape. 4, they played it back at the station. Jeremy's voice came through quieter now, weaker. "I think I made it to phase 3, he said. "If I finish this one, I get to see the sky again." A pause. "Someone was here before me." "She didn't finish. I think she got taken away." Another pause, barely a whisper. "If anyone finds this, don't believe him. Don't believe in the promise." Then silence followed by a click. A second voice entered the tape. Not Jeremy's subject did not progress. End of recording. And he still read 2 days later. Corey Treadwell was located at a shuttered roadside motel, 50 Min North. He was found alone. A note in his handwriting lay on the floor. "You found 1 wall, but I built more." Jeremy's funeral took place on October 31st, exactly 36 years to the day. Since his mother first posted flyers in Cherry Hill, his father, Ben Holt, stood quietly by the grave, holding a small box of keepsakes recovered from the cabin. A plastic sheriff's badge, a blue marble, a harmonica. He placed the marble on the headstone. Tears wetting the leaves beneath his feet. "I found you," he whispered. "You're not behind the wall anymore." 3 weeks later, Mercer sat in a darkened room at the FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit, reviewing satellite images from the regions surrounding the cabin. 3 new excavation sites had been flagged by ground-penetrating radar. They were too symmetrical to be natural, too deep to be recent, too precise to be anything but planned. They would dig them up. They would exhume every last truth. This man and whoever had helped him buried, but she already knew Jeremy Holt was not the only boy behind a wall.